This is Eugene Puryear with Breakthrough News, and we are here at the People's Summit, and we are very honored to be joined by a longtime leader in Puerto Rico's struggle for independence and one of the longest held political prisoners in the United States, Oscar López Rivera. Oscar, thank you so much for being with us here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, my first question is, how does it feel for you to hear all this conversation from President Biden about democracy and excluding different countries when Puerto Rico still remains a colony of the United States?
Well, for the United States, Puerto Rico is the colony. And for purposes that are really, really bad and anti-human, even every single president that I've met during or heard during the times I've been in Chicago, it's always been a very, very, conflict. The conflicts is there. You cannot see these people in the same way that you would like to see them, because they are so arrogant. They are so their way of living, their way of wanting life, is completely opposite to what we need at this particular juncture, especially.
Congress is taking up once again, at least potentially, this issue of what Puerto Rico's status could be and independence, statehood, various different things that will be debated. And I think something that many people in the U.S. don't fully understand is the reality of the colonial nature of Puerto Rico. So could you talk about the importance of the independence fight in this context versus statehood or some of these other proposals?
Well, for all of us, the most important thing is the independence of Puerto Rico. We want a free, independent Puerto Rico. We want Puerto Rico to be decolonized. We do not accept colonialism. We have never accepted colonialism. We have fought against it. We know how manipulative the whole thing of colonization is, because they can change from one thing to the other. They can do whatever they want to do with the human being. I will give you a perfect example. In 2017, during the time that they were getting ready to go into World War I, all of a sudden they said Puerto Ricans are citizens of the United States. We have never been citizens of the United States. It's the complete opposite. From that moment on, the same pattern. Every time there was a war, Puerto Ricans would go into it. I was forced to go to Vietnam. I received a letter saying, if you do not report to the induction center, you can face up to 5 years in federal prison. The least thing that I wanted to do was to go to a federal prison. And all of a sudden, that's where I find myself, and then be taken to a war, be taken to fight Vietnamese people. Everything that was within me was the opposite, but I was forced to do it. I had no options in this case, and that is the mindset that really prevails. They do not see us as real human beings. They still have that hatred. They still have the same. It goes like from one parent to the next, and we still facing the same problems.
It seems like one aspect of the colonial nature, especially in the wake of Hurricane Maria, is this attempt to turn Puerto Rico into this gentrified tourist paradise and essentially sell off all the land for Americans to come and live cheaply. Could you talk about those sorts of moves?
Right now we are facing probably the biggest threat that we have had. I had never seen anything like this. All of a sudden, in 2007, all of a sudden I'm in prison. I hear this voice saying, Puerto Rico is for sale. And it shook me. I was trying to figure out, why is this person saying that Puerto Rico is for sale? Because I couldn't figure it out. 10 months later, I'm in Puerto Rico. And then I started digging to see who this person was. And he had owned property in San Juan, and he was buying property throughout Puerto Rico. I went to friends of mine, and I asked them if they understood what was going on. Why are we allowing this to happen? They had not even gotten conscious of what was coming along, what was happening, what those people who were all of a sudden moving into Puerto Rico, what they represented, it was a threat to us. The biggest threat that we can have, because automatically they're going to be pushing us out. They don't want Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico anymore. If we look at the number of people from the United States in Puerto Rico right now, we are shocked. If we go to Rincon, half of the population right now of Rincon, they had a population. The other half is made of American. Rincon expanded extensively. If we go to Puerto Rico right now, and let's say that we go into San Juan, we can see some of the houses that were in the hands of poor people. Some of those houses have been taken away from them, because that's the best way that I can define it. They take the houses, they kick these people who lived there, they are no longer there, and all of a sudden they begin to fix them. They make them Airbnb homes, of course, for the people from the United States and other countries if they can bring them in, and also this is like moving one thing to another thing to another thing. We can see also like real expensive homes, and they're going to be sold, but these are just built to be sold. Now that means that none of us are going to go into that area, because they're not homes for us. The price of those homes will be very, very high. And if we go throughout Puerto Rico, it's the same thing. Whatever homes are being built, they're not for us. They're not for poor people. They're not for working people. The working class is not going to go there. So what awaits us? And that's another question that we are challenging ourselves with. We want to make sure that we understand what is going on, and we want to make sure that if we're going to struggle, we are going to struggle to win. We're not going to do anything else but our struggle is very, very clear to us, and Puerto Rico definitely, until our last breath, has to be an independent country. And it cannot be a colony. No more colonies, no more colonizing in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm. And it raises an interesting question. I think I'm curious your thoughts about, which is, what is the U.S. afraid of losing? Why is it so unwilling to grant Puerto Rico its independence? I think a lot of people would say, hey, it's the 21st century. Why are we still holding a colony?
Well, I think that Puerto Rico right now is equal to Hawaii. I remember when Americans from the 48 states started moving into Hawaii. And little by little, we knew that eventually the Hawaiian population was going to be very small, and the people from the 48 states were moving in, and you could definitely figure it out. It was nothing that we could not figure out. And little by little, when it's convenient for the United States, they say, oh, Hawaii is going to be the 58th state. So all of a sudden, Hawaiians were no longer native Hawaiians, because the number is the population is very small, and also whatever goes into Hawaii is an American product. And so we know exactly how the future is going to be flowing, how the future is going to be. And for the native Hawaiian, I feel a lot of pain, because that's their land. And from the moment, we can go back to 1865, when the guy from the sugar cane went into Hawaii. And one of the things that a lot of people do not know is how the Hawaiians were paid. Because at that time, Great Britain was selling opium, and that guy bring opium to pay the Hawaiians with opium. But it was a question of also making them addicted to opium. So it is something that was never brought out in a correct way. At that time, everything was hidden. So from that moment on, we can look at how the United States government was going to grab Hawaii. By 1892, by 1692, they had already figured out how they were going to take it over. And by the time that they decided that hey, the war was over, they had defeated the Japanese, and they said this is the moment. This is the moment to go and make Hawaii a state, because they were moving as many people from the 48 states as they could and place them in Hawaii. And that's probably the best way that I can describe the history of how Hawaii was literally almost destroyed.
Mm-hmm. You know, I had the opportunity to hear the Secretary of State of the United States speak the other day, and he was, going on about Cuba especially being authoritarian and having all these political prisoners. And I wonder, for someone who, has not only been a political prisoner, but you've been on the inside of the U.S. prison system, I mean, how does that strike you to hear the U.S. calling other people authoritarian and claiming that they're terrible for having political prisoners?
Whenever I have a chance and I hear them, I challenge them. It is my way of getting even with them. How the United States functions, how the leadership of the United States, what they do, and they hide behind things. There's never clarity into what they're doing, but they go after something, and they are going to do damage to that something. And for me, the way I see the United States, especially the political structure, we can see how negative that political structure is. If we go to Puerto Rico right now, this is one thing that I want to share with you. We have Puerto Ricans who are politicians. The first thing, I can give you an example of one of them, so I don't have to cover a lot of it. The guy who's the governor right now, Pierluisi. Pierluisi comes from a very affluent family. Number one, he and his wife came to Washington as commissioner, resident commissioner in Washington, D.C., the structure that is there. His wife became one of those persons who were just doing lobbying work. They stay there, they get a lot of money, then they go to Puerto Rico. We are fighting against one corporation that is in Puerto Rico. It's AES, which is this company that came from the Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic pushed them out. They come into Puerto Rico, and the product that they bring into Puerto Rico is a carcinogen. We have quite a few people. I have two friends of mine, dear friends of mine, who are victims of cancer. And the two of them were really, really hard-working Puerto Ricans to help our communities. Now, both of them, it's very difficult because both of them, they have cancer. Now, Pierluisi becomes the lawyer of that corporation when he comes into Puerto Rico. Then, he goes from there and he goes to the Fiscal Control Board, and he becomes the lawyer for the Fiscal Control Board. All these things are against us. All these things are damaging to us. All these things represent only them and their interests, not ours. So that is the reality that we're facing constantly, especially when we're dealing with something that is poisonous, that is damaging our environment. And there's no rule that they're saying, hey, we're going to make this clean and we're going to get out of Puerto Rico. They're there.
And that's a long history as well in Puerto Rico of human experimentation, of other forms of environmental racism. Talk about that a little if you could.
Well, I can give you, very fast, I can give you some of it. The United States came to Puerto Rico. The invasion is there. One of the first things that they say is, but Puerto Rico is densely populated. We had less than 1 million Puerto Ricans, and all of a sudden they define us as densely populated. And by 1901, they were sending Puerto Ricans to Hawaii. They were sending Puerto Ricans to the south of the United States. And when we look at that, we say, why were they doing this? Well, they definitely wanted Puerto Ricans out of Puerto Rico. They wanted the Puerto Ricans, they wanted the land, they wanted the Puerto Rican worker, if they can exploit them. But the goal was to really take over Puerto Rico, dominate Puerto Rico, and not allow Puerto Rico to do anything of like fighting for independence, of trying to save ourselves. And from that moment on, we can go into one that is very, very painful to me, and it's the sterilization of the Puerto Rican woman. They decided to begin sterilizing Puerto Rican women, and by 1936, about probably 26% of the Puerto Rican women have been sterilized. And now nobody knew, the Puerto Ricans did not know what was going on. The woman would be taken into a hospital and she would be sterilized, and she didn't even know that she had been sterilized. So that is part of, like at least one or two of the things that I can point out. But there are so many things that they used against us that definitely have had a very, very painful process for Puerto Rican. It's very difficult for Puerto Ricans to feel that we have accomplished ourselves, that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish. It is very difficult because we know that ahead of us is the big wall that they're going to say, we're not going to allow you. We're not going to allow you to do anything except when we get rid of you, then we're not going to worry.
Well, Oscar López Rivera, really appreciate you joining us here on Breakthrough News.
Thank you.
Thank you.